Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. The Toronto Argonauts move on to the East Final with a 58-38 win over the Ottawa Redblacks. Ben Grant and JB with you to go through all the action, sum up everything we saw in this record-tying afternoon. The Argos and Redblacks combining for 96 points, which ties the CFL record going back to 2011 when the Ticats downed the Alouettes with a similar, actually exact same 96 points. Before we get into everything today, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing. It is not too late to get your Longboat Pale Ale, the beer that was made for fans of the Double Blue. I love that we're getting photos tweeted at our account. Guys down there enjoying their Something in the Water Brewing beer. They have so many great beers to choose from. Even if you don't go with Longboat Pale Ale, now, first of all, you should, because it's the beer that was made for you, for fans of the Double Blue. But if you don't, they got a ton of award-winning selections to go with. So try out one of their many award-winning beers, and they've got something for all seasons. There's always stuff on the go. We're into fall now, and you can go and try some of their new creations, as well as some of the old favorites. Something in the Water Brewing's in Liberty Village, steps from BMO Field, and steps from Lamport Stadium, the Argos practice facility. JB, I wish there was something to talk about in this one. 58-38. Man, we're gonna have to be careful to make sure this doesn't turn into a 4-hour show.
Yeah, that was an epic playoff game.
Yeah, no, it was, and I believe I was the one that predicted the under. I didn't bet on it, but I said this would be a defensive battle. I felt strongly this would be a defensive battle, and instead it was the highest scoring playoff game in history. So I couldn't have been more wrong. But to be fair, I also predicted a defensive touchdown. That was my bet of the week, and that is going to cash in at plus 440 or whatever that was. So one swing and miss and one out of the park. What an entertaining game. This was one of the most entertaining playoff games I can remember. And it's not just that high score equals entertainment. We saw a little bit of everything. You saw what was a bit of a defensive struggle in that first quarter, and then things started opening up. We saw fumbles and interceptions and sacks and huge hits, long field goals, record-setting numbers on both sides of the football, some interesting special teams plays, some adjustments, some trickery, a flea flicker. This game had everything except for a goal line stand, which we can maybe talk about as we get into the podcast a little
bit. Yeah.
So let's start with how the game began. Concerns. Argos started 2-0. Their first drive was 2-0 after Ottawa had gone down the field 5 yards at a time. And I was worried right away because initially it looked like if Ottawa's going to be able to stay on the field for sustained drives like this, and Toronto's just going to have 2-0s, not only is the score going to get away from them, the defense is going to get tired. And I know the Argos dressed 9 defensive linemen. Damonte Coxie couldn't go. They used that extra place for Jordan Williams. It's a good thing they did, because even at the end, it was really out of balance early. But even at the end, the Redblacks doubled time of possession. They ran 78 offensive plays to Toronto's 38 offensive plays. I believe at the half, it was like 43-11. The defense did a great job considering they were on the field the entire afternoon. What do you think about the strategy of just keeping everything in front of them? Because it felt like everything was a 5 or 7 yard gain, but nothing went too big aside from one Khalil Pimpleton catch and run.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting debate. Like, was that Toronto's game plan, or was that them reacting to Ottawa's game plan? Much like that game last year, I think it was last year, where, the team, I think did Montreal run like 42 screens in a row?
Yes.
That's obviously with the aggressive Toronto defense that, they saw an opening there. They saw that the screen was open, that underneath was going to be open. They went empty a bunch of times, and, that can really throw you because so few teams go empty. And then you start getting into, well, whose responsibility are the running backs? And that can often be a problem. So I think it's great for Toronto because, I think those would have been two of the primary tools Montreal might have pulled out against them, in the playoff game. So I think it's terrific that they got to at least look at that and look at some tape and think about how are they going to handle empty. What are they going to do about screens? What are they going to do about passes to the running back? Are you going to let a team, throw 45 times upon you and try and get away with it? I don't think that's the plan. They definitely tried a little more man in the second half. But full credit to Brown. I mean, the guy was throwing dimes all day. I mean, he just made great throws all day.
He had a pretty good day statistically, but he had those two interceptions, and he had some trouble when he got out of the pocket. He made one really nice throw out of the pocket, but most of the rest of them, once they chased him, he had trouble from inside the pocket. When he was protected, yeah, he was throwing lasers. He was really accurate. He used Pimpleton a lot. I'll go through some of those stats. Some of them are absurd. But the philosophy that looked like from the Toronto defense, at least in the first half, was every play rush 4. They really didn't blitz in the first half. The only time I noticed them blitzing in the first half was when Crum came in near the goal line and what ended up being a draw play. Toronto blitzed right into it, and it went for 1 yard. But aside from that, it was we're going to rush 4 or we're going to rush 3. The DBs are going to umbrella deep, and the linebackers are going to try and spread out, fan out, and take everything away underneath. And that seemed to be their plan, and that's why everything was kept in front of them. And that's why you end up with like some of these stats, like Khalil Pimpleton with 13 catches, but for only 123 yards. Like as a point of comparison, Makai Polk had 158 on only 4 catches. So very different strategies.
You can't say it worked. I mean, I think it worked if you play a team that can't cover a deep pass. But I don't think I can't imagine the plan was to give up hundreds and hundreds of yards and 40 points.
No, it wasn't. But let's break that down then. So how would you have done this differently? Because with that 6 wide, and to be clear, if you didn't get a chance to see this game and you're just listening to us now, Ottawa, instead of dressing a running back, similar to what they did last week, just put Braylon Addison in the backfield. So he's a receiver, and now he's playing running back. They had no intention of running Braylon Addison. He had 4 carries for 17 yards, but they knew they weren't going to be able to run the football. They knew they weren't going to be able to use that as part of their offense this week. And so they also had a problem where because the receivers were all healthy, they were going to have to bench probably Khalil Pimpleton. And they're like, we can't bench this guy. He's such a good playmaker. We can't bench Addison or Rhymes or Ackland or Justin Hardy, the East's leading receiver. And so the only way to get all 6 of those guys, Mardner is the Canadian that they dress out of the Z, the way to get all 6 of those guys on the field is to put Addison as a running back, and we're just going to leak him out of the backfield on every play, sometimes line up 6 wide. And that's what they did. So if you are defending a 6 wide team, how do you go if Montreal decides to do this next week? Let's say Montreal decides, you know what, we're not going to run the ball at all. We're going to go 6 wide. How do you do it differently?
Well, it can be difficult. I mean, I probably would have mixed in more man, especially when they went empty, because they really were not getting much traction at all. I mean, that old line about, well, if you can go 10 plays, then we'll tip your hat. I mean, basically they were going 10 plays and Toronto's tipping their hat.
A lot of hat tipping.
I think at a certain point you have to say, okay, well, look, we can't just let them go 10 plays down into the red zone over and over and over again. I would have played that empty a little more aggressive. I thought they did in the second half. I thought they played the leaking out running back a little better. They were firing guys from the secondary. Like when they brought a little more pass rush, they fired guys out because they knew the pass was coming out to the running back. I might have played that more aggressive rather than I think it kind of took them a half to get a sense of it, because it is so weird. You just never play teams that run empty. Like almost no defensive setup is built with the concept of empty. And so it can mess with your rules a little bit. I think it did. So that if I were Toronto, I would definitely be thinking about how do we want to play empty, because I would bet Montreal saw that there were some ways to get some yards here when they went into empty.
Well, what they were giving up was flats. That's what they
Yeah,
were leaving open. So when Ottawa went empty, when they went six wide, Toronto was really clouding downfield, like sticking with receivers, playing underneath receivers deep downfield. And so when you had those quick outs, or if there was a running back who leaked out into the flats, they were generally wide open. They also had a couple of drag routes come across. Same thing where there's a lot of running room after the catch. Now, Toronto closed fairly quickly. Like when I say a lot of running room, they would only get at most 20 yards out of plays like this. But they were consistently able to convert those second and long situations. I think there were 5 in the first half where they converted second and more than 10, which is pretty impressive to be able to do that. So Toronto
right.
was playing well on first down, but giving up a lot on second.
I think that's when, yeah, I think when you're converting second and long, as a defense, it's like, okay, we need to make some corrections here. We can't have, if a team is converting second and long, our defense is not working. And, it might not look as bad as Ottawa giving up, 2 play touchdowns. But the end result was the same thing.
Every time I see, like, I've got the stats up on the screen in front of me, and every time I see the score, I want to burst out laughing. Like, if I just the Argos led up 38 points in a playoff game and won by 20. Like, it's so bizarre.
And I think it's the perfect game. Again, I think it's perfect. You get the win. Specials were fine. The offense worked well. I think defensively, there's lots of stuff to sink your teeth into to have the team's attention this week. I think it's a perfect playoff victory for the team in terms of preparation for Montreal.
I'm going to go all over the place a little bit here because there's so much to talk about. And as things pop into my head, I'm just going to take in that direction. You mentioned somewhere in the last thing you said, special teams. What did you think about the decision not to kick deep? Because I really liked it. You had 2 really dangerous returners. We all know what Dedmon can do. And then Khalil Pimpleton is highly dangerous, really tough to bring down, lightning fast. He's got great lateral movement too. He can explode anything. And so they decided instead to basically sky it and have it come down to one of the blockers at the 35-yard line. So it was always going to be like a fullback or the defensive end who's catching that kickoff at the 35, mind you, but probably only going forwards 2 yards. Do you like that strategy? I love it.
No, yeah, I thought that was perfect. I thought, especially having not done it all year.
Yeah, they hadn't shown it once.
That's what I mean. So Ottawa didn't have a return wrinkle, but that they might use, like whether they want to adjust things. I thought it made perfect sense, especially against Ottawa, just because their kick return game is so elite. It really let the strength of Toronto's special teams, hammer away at those guys because there was no issue of out kicking the coverage. The coverage was right on top of them, and it took away Montreal's, really one of their primary weapons. I thought that, and of course you trade off. Look, was it nice to bury a team on the 5? Yeah, but I thought that was a worthwhile gamble, and 100% paid off.
And the special teams came to play today. 2 weeks ago against Ottawa, special teams were the reason it got so close down the stretch. Today, special teams was in full redemption mode. They made some great tackles, made some great plays, had some clever strategies, and went 1 for 1 in recovering onside kicks. So a little bit of everything working. And Janarian Grant had a couple really nice returns mixed in there too. So all in all, a really nice day for special teams. I want to talk about kicking just to finish up our special teams talk as we completely go out of order here. There was something strange today because there wasn't much wind. Like, as far as I can tell, watching the flags, looking at the banners, the championship banners, the wind was coming off the lake, but only a light breeze. And yet, all day long, it affected kickers going that way. It didn't affect the throws. Quarterbacks weren't affected at all. But for whatever reason, the ball was getting knocked down. It happened in pregame. I was watching Haralahu warm me up in pregame, and usually he's money from 50, 52. He had kicks that were coming up short, and that just doesn't happen to him. And it was the same thing on the other side with Ottawa. Whenever they went into the wind, that ball was getting knocked down. And I don't have an explanation for it because it seemed to be the only element of the game where the wind was a factor. Is there anything else that can explain this? Like, I don't think cold weather explains it. It's just got to be one of those days where whatever reason, the way the wind was swirling around the stadium, it just affected the field goal kicks and punts that way.
It's interesting. I don't know whether it's like some weird meteorological, like we've had a couple of warm days and now here's a cold day. And so now we have layers of air. And maybe when the ball gets a little higher, it's running into colder air. I don't,
I don't know enough about it. Like
as scientific as I can get, but
yeah.
for sure, those long kicks were just made.
Yeah. Yeah,
like,
well,
which is very unusual.
yarder.
Usually, even a 50, which is quite a long kick, you rarely have a 50 kind of be like 52, which is what it looked like. Like it was definitely, it was definitely, the ball was not flying off the foot.
No, it was weird, but it was going okay the other way. Like Haralahu set a season best, that last play of the half. We'll get to that in a minute, but that last play of the half was his longest field goal of the season. So the other direction, I know he really punched it to get it there, but the other direction seemed to be traveling.
Yeah, and
fine.
he was so money today. I mean, he just, he absolutely is, I don't know if he's the signing of the year, but man, well, where would they be without him?
Yeah, no, he was a CFL leader in points. Like he was a crucial part of Toronto's success so far this season. Okay, let's finish up. We started by talking about the defense. Let's just wrap up talking about the defense, and then we'll move to the offensive side of the ball. So Drew Brown's numbers, 46 of 61 for 476 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But they had nothing at all going on the ground. Their leading rusher, 4 carries for 17 yards. That was it. Dustin Crum, 4 carries for 1 yard and 1 touchdown. Maybe this is the time to talk about that goal line stand, because this could have been the moment where the game essentially ended. Ottawa had first and goal from the 1 yard line. Toronto clearly stuffed them on first down. Jack Cassar made a huge play. On second down, I believe it was McManus that came up and made a huge play. On third down, Ottawa was ruled short. It was overturned and called a touchdown. JB, what did you see on that play?
Well, I'm conflicted. Obviously, I've had some contention with the command center over the course of the year. When I watched it live, I felt he got in. When they ruled he didn't get in, I was happy. When they showed the replay, I felt, well, there's nothing conclusive to say he got in. I mean, if you look at that replay, you're like, yeah, maybe. But at the end of the day, you can't see the ball. And so, the rule is to overturn the call on the field. Like, I knew, had that been called a touchdown, that replay would not have changed it to no touchdown.
Right.
However, having called no touchdown, and I know the announcers were talking about how clearly it's in, but like, you can't see the football. You're not allowed to hypothesize or guess or make an educational gambit about, well, the ball must be there in his hand. Like that's not how we have decided to use replay. It's supposed to be clear and unarguable that the ball crossed the line, and it just isn't on the replay. So I was really frustrated because that was a decision that contradicted what the rules are supposed to be on replay, even though I feel they got it right. That doesn't matter. There's no way anybody could stand and say, look, here's the football over the line in that replay, because that was not in the replay that we were shown on TV.
Yeah, we felt similarly. And Mike Hogan and I watching it on replay and doing the broadcast on radio, like we said the same thing, where he's clearly in the end zone. There's no way the ball couldn't have been in the end zone, because we knew where the ball was and we could see his body falling over the end zone and the ball didn't move anywhere. But you're right. Like, there was no visual, there was no camera angle, unless there's one we didn't see. And maybe that's the case. But ultimately, I wasn't too frustrated with that because I believe it was the right result. It's just you want consistency. But at the end of the day, I would have been upset if I believed it was the wrong result and they had overturned it.
Yeah, well, I would have been that inside out ball of flame. Had I not felt like, upon watching it, thinking, I think he got in there. Had I not thought he got in, and they had overturned it, I might have gone bananas. But what is Ottawa doing going for two?
Yeah, I don't know. I had trouble with some of the going for two. My philosophy on going for two is always that you save that until your last touchdown of the game. And at that point, they were down. I think that was to make it. It was to be down 11 or whatever. And again, I think you still need a touchdown. Wait on it.
I understand the philosophy, and they talked about on TV. I understand the philosophy of knowing if you need to go for two or not. That's kind of the mantra, right, for going for two early. But that's not true if you're still 2 scores down.
Right.
You can't go for two if the result is you're 2 scores down. Now you need 2 more scores, not 8.
Yeah,
you need 9.
I don't know. This comes up a lot though, and actually, Coach Dinwiddie does this too sometimes. He and I are on different pages with when to go for two as well. He likes 7-point increments, and so he will sometimes even early. Like we've seen it even on like the first touchdown of the game. He wants to make things about 7-point differences, and so he will go for it. Whereas I always wait because I just feel like there's so much stuff that can happen in a football game, especially in a CFL game where you've also got singles mixed in there. I just think you wait. But again, that wasn't why Ottawa lost the game. It was just a weird decision in an evening of strange events.
Why? I don't mind going, but you can't. I just can't. You can't go for two if the result is you're still down 9.
Yes. No,
it's like, well, at least now we know we have to score twice. Good.
I know.
Now you know.
I know. Well, I don't know what to make of that, but that's not our problem. Are you worried about the tackling? Because that was something that came up. It felt like Pimpleton especially, but there were a few guys that seemed to bounce off tackles that looked a little bit more body check-like, and that's not something that I feel like the Argos have done a lot. There have been a few instances where it felt like guys checked guys instead of tackled them. It felt like there were a lot of broken tackles today. None that resulted in huge plays after the fact, but a few that resulted in 2 or 3 more yards. Did that stand out to you as something they got to clean up?
No, it didn't. I mean, it didn't jump out to me. I mean, of course, we've talked about this. This Argo team is not nearly as physical as last year's team was. Just different personnel, and they just aren't.
Different style.
Yeah, they just don't have the headhunters that that they used to have. Not headhunters, but hunters, if you will. Like they had guys looking for violence, and I thought it was mainly that look, when that's the danger of screenplays is when you have a guy in space, it can be really hard to make a tackle. Those coming up and cleaning up screen tackles can be really hard. You really want to be on top of screens at the moment of the catch because, it's just really challenging to put your linebackers and DBs in a position where they're constantly trying to tackle in space. It is very challenging to do. So I would hope that some of that screen defense is going to be cleaned up a little. So there's, the contact comes a little closer to the moment of catch.
There were a lot of passes that Drew Brown completed that were in really tight coverage.
I couldn't believe the one over McManus's hand.
I think it even tipped. I think McManus got a finger on it. If he didn't, it was within an inch of it. And then there were Argo defenders on either side of Justin Hardy, and somehow it goes just over McManus's hand, just in between the 2 Argo defenders into Hardy's chest. But there were a few like that. Like Benji Franklin was all over Khalil Pimpleton on a number of different throws. He couldn't have been in better coverage, and yet it just hit Pimpleton right in the chest. Hardy had a few like that as well. Brown was on the money. Like you have to give. This is the second game in a row. I said this last time they played Ottawa. Drew Brown, if there's any Redblacks fans listening to this, and I know we do sometimes get fans from other teams listening to see what we have to say about the game and the broadcast, Drew Brown is a CFL quarterback. He is really fun to watch. He was not the reason that the Redblacks lost the game today. He's got an exciting future in Ottawa, and so as a Redblacks fan, you should be very excited about having him under contract going into next season.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if Ottawa had a running game, they would be a significant issue.
Yeah, or if they didn't give up 58 points.
Or if they didn't try and do an onside at the end of the first.
Yeah. Oh, I know. All right. Well, let's transition. We said we're done with special teams. Let's do that play, and then we'll talk about the Toronto offense. So momentum shifts. In the first half, you had Toronto had no momentum at all. They had 2 and out, then a field goal drive. Ottawa's putting up points. They're starting to run away with it. It's not feeling good. It felt like there were a few moments of like flashbacks from last year's East final where it just felt like things were getting away. The cart was starting to run away from us a bit. And then
go ahead.
Toronto put together a couple of drives and actually took the lead. There was the huge home run to Makai Polk on a bust on a seam route that went for 70 yards. And then next possession, DaVaris Daniels, same thing, seam route gone. Looked like a bust again where there wasn't help over top. And suddenly they were leading by a point. And it felt like, hey, if Toronto can go up, or go into halftime up a point. They played a terrible first half. Ottawa played really well, but they settled for like 14-yard field goal, 16-yard field goal. And if Toronto can take the lead into the half, they're going to feel like they've got all the momentum in the world. Ottawa's going to feel like they missed so many opportunities. But then Ottawa had an outstanding drive all the way down for a touchdown with 6 seconds left. And it was 23-17 at that point. You're thinking, well, now Ottawa's got the momentum back. They got to be feeling good about themselves. And somehow in those 6 seconds, they found a way to shoot themselves in the foot. Toronto ends up going into the locker room feeling pretty good, down only a field goal. What do you make of what happened? And what do you think happened? Because I know there's some disagreement that I've seen on my social media feed as to what the intention was on that play from Ottawa. What I saw it as is it was a squib kick that he hit wrong and it went right off an Argos defender. I didn't see that as an intentional onside because why would you do that with only 6 seconds left?
I agree. I mean, surely to God, it was not an onside kick because you wouldn't recover it anywhere near where it would be any use to you. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if it was, then may God have mercy on their souls. It did look like a squib kind of reacted to how Toronto was keeping the ball away from their returners, and the feelings. Okay, we're not gonna end this half with a Toronto kick return, which is going to shift the game back. So we're going to squib the ball. But I thought they got really cute with it. They had guys moving from one side to the other. They had some overlap action. Like it was definitely more complicated than it needed to be. And the squib kick, you have to make sure that doesn't hit the front line. That's the one thing you have to accomplish in the squib kick is you have to make sure it doesn't hit the front line, and it hit the front line. So whether that's just poor execution by the kicker, or a misunderstanding of,
exactly that. And with 3 seconds left,
they were like, and you had we're going to kind of have squib, and if we end up with the ball, that's okay too.
So Harry Lamanna gets hit with the football. It bounces beside him. Exime did a great job to recover it because I thought for a moment that Ottawa was going to recover that. It wouldn't have mattered, and that's why you don't onside kick it there because Ottawa was deep in their own end. But instead, now it's a field goal attempt. So 3 seconds left. That's when Haralahu runs back out there, and now you've got a field goal attempt to end the first half, and the Argos go in down just a field goal. So that was such a turn of events.
Yeah, if you're Ottawa, if you're that terrified, which I would be surprised by because I didn't feel like Grant had been a terror in the first half. But if you suddenly are overthinking it and you're that terrified that you can't control him, then just simply do what Toronto had been doing and kick it straight up in the air.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I don't know what they did with that. It was just
so many things that can go wrong with the squib where, I just think that's a matter. I just think that's Ottawa overthinking it. And instead of just kick the ball and go into half, and no one's going to blame you for not squibbing it. Just cover the kick and move on instead of instead of trying to get a little too, they just tried to get a little too cute. And I know you're not a football god guy, but when that happened, I just knew no team is going to win a game when they commit such an egregious error.
Yeah,
The gods will not have it. It was an error of such magnitude that I just felt like, well, that's it for Ottawa. You don't get to have you don't get to do something that dumb and laugh about it after the game.
I call that momentum. And I think you go into the locker room with the Argos feeling, hey, we got a break there. It gave us 3 points. We're only a field goal down, and we're getting the ball to start the second half. Let's transition and talk about the offense. This was one of the best games I've seen from Chad Kelly. I know he had a fumble, but it was on something that wasn't his fault. We talk about the offensive line maybe in a minute. This is going to be the highest PFF rating maybe of the entire season for anybody. 18 of 20 for 358 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also ran for 29 yards on 2 carries and had a touchdown in there, really used his feet well. This game from Chad Kelly, this has got to be his best performance of the season, right?
I mean, he looked, superb. I mean, he just absolutely was what you want, which is, like he essentially identified busts immediately and just was throwing dagger after dagger, down the field. And it was almost hard to evaluate him because Ottawa just never forced him to use the underneath, because on almost every set of downs, there was somebody running wide open and free down the field.
And what I give him a lot of credit for is identifying that. Like, it's easy for me, like from my vantage point, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see I'm right at midfield, high up in the air. We can see the coverage very well from up here. Here's why we do the broadcast from up here. It is very difficult down on the field when you're playing quarterback and there are all these 300-pound guys surrounding you, coming at you. You've got all these moving pieces. Missing busts happens all the time. You see it every single week where there's a bust on one side or the other. Quarterback never sees it. Chad saw every single one today, and he saw them immediately. That one to Makai Polk, he had barely finished his 3-step. He hit his back foot and was already into his throwing motion because he saw it materializing. DaVaris Daniels, same thing, right away. It's there. The second touchdown to DaVaris, he starts to roll out and he realized right away they haven't covered this zone. There's no one in the zone. And so he starts his roll and I'm just going to flip it to DaVaris for another touchdown. Every single time Ottawa screwed up, he made them pay, and he saw it instantly. To me, that's what makes this such a good game from Chad Kelly. If he gets penalized at all, it'll be for that fumble, that turnover that he had. But that's on the offensive line. Now, let's talk about that one play. We can talk about the couple times Chad really got hit hard. One was on that play. Lorenzo Malden just pasted him into the ground. He wasn't touched. It looked to me, watching it live, I haven't seen a replay of it yet, but it looked to me like Dejan Allen let Malden run inside. And I don't know, he maybe thought that Vandal was going to pick him up. But to me, it looked like Allen should have had him and the free runner should have been left out on the edge. Is that how it looked on TV, having had a chance to see a replay?
Well, I think so. I mean, I agree. I think Chad Kelly also feels that Allen should have had him.
Somebody should have. You can't let somebody come through B-gap.
Sent a look towards Allen that suggested such a thing. Because like, hey man, I'm gonna get killed back here. Like, it's one thing I understand, if everybody bull rushes, but you can't let a free shot like that come through. Like, you're gonna get me killed.
And then what did you think of the play where Chad Kelly turned and ran, had about a 15-yard gain or so, went to slide, and then was hit late? I feel like it was Griffin that hit him late.
Yeah,
It looked like it was a late hit, looked like it was helmet to helmet, and flag was thrown on the play. Was that a dirty play? Was that intentional? Was that a late slide? Like, how are you breaking that down, having seen replays of that?
Right. I mean, that goes back to my earlier conversation about that idiot, in Winnipeg. I mean, to me, that's a game ejection. That's a game ejection. Quarterbacks are different than the other people. You can't have some idiot defensive player smashing his head into Chad Kelly's head. And I don't want to hear any long stories of, well, there's no way to slow yourself, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there is. And he didn't, and he shot him in the head, and he should be ejected immediately for headshot. And I don't know why the league doesn't get serious about it. Like nobody wants to see, Mazzoli versus Dukes. Nobody wants to see that game. There are basically four star quarterbacks in the CFL, and they should do everything in their power openly and transparently to protect them. And I don't understand why that's not an immediate ejection. It makes no sense to me. It's still such backward retroactive thinking by the league. Like quarterbacks are different. They're allowed to slide. Like, why is this player allowed to continue to play? Suppose the concussion people decided he didn't pass. Now Chad's out of the game because some idiot broke the rule. Why wouldn't you take a 15-yard penalty to knock a quarterback out of the game? Of course you would. It's way like it's the math is completely off from a defensive point of view. They're like, okay, I'll take 15 yards and I'll take a shot that either the quarterback is hurt or that the quarterback doesn't pass the concussion protocol. And now their star quarterback is gone and I get to play the rest of the game. That's easy math. It should be. Or if I'm wrong, I'm ejected from the game. And I don't know why the CFL doesn't do it, and it enrages me beyond all sense that they don't protect their quarterbacks. I mean, get on top of this.
And there will be a fine, but I get what you're saying in terms of
fine.
Yeah, I know it doesn't add up the same way. Now, the ramifications of that were that Chad Kelly had to come out. Now, what he was frustrated by too. So first of all, he was frustrated at having to come out because he felt he was fine. But I understand that concussion spotter. I think that's the right thing. I think you do want to take Chad out and take a look and make sure he's okay. When you see a helmet like that, he landed on the field for a couple of seconds. I don't blame the concussion spotter. I think he's doing his job. That's great.
Yeah, that's fine.
But then the frustration too. There's no time. And so Arbuckle was trying to get warmed up quickly. And Chad Kelly, as he's coming out of the game, he sees he's like, Arbuckle hasn't even thrown a warm-up pass yet. So he takes a knee. He's like if I'm going to come out of the game, then you're going to come out and get me. We're going to take a minute here because I got to let my quarterback throw a few balls before sending him right into the fire. He was off to the medical tent. Arbuckle came in, and this was a huge moment in the game. Kadeem Carey ran 3 straight plays, 2 first downs on those 3 runs, and everybody in the stadium knew it was going to be a run play. Ottawa knew it was going to be a run play, and yet Kadeem Carey was able to grind out yards. You give full credit to the offensive line for just saying, I know Ottawa's coming at us here, but we're going to block our guys 5 yards downfield. They did exactly that. 3 plays went by. There was more time taken because I think it was Lorenzo Malden that got banged up on a play. He had to go down. That bought some more time, and Chad Kelly was able to come back in. His first play, and he rolls out, throws a touchdown to DaVaris Daniels, and then suddenly, the wheels started flying off.
It worked out superbly for the Argos, but yeah. I mean, it doesn't change the fact that I think it's a huge issue because why wouldn't you, as a defensive player, take a shot at Kelly with your helmet? Well, why not? Just because you're a good guy? This is professional football. Why wouldn't you try and take the quarterback out? Of course you would. Let's not be naive. So I think I think the league has got to step up and protect these guys.
Let's talk about the running game. Not much success there other than those 3 plays. That's where it all came. You had an 11-yard run, an 8-yard run, a 7-yard run. But Kadeem Carey, 9 carries for 43 yards. You take out those 3 runs on when Arbuckle was in, and there was almost nothing there. Ottawa, it's not like they were selling out to stop the run, but I thought their defensive line played well. We talked about how it is a tough team to run on. The Redblacks aren't easy to move the ball on the ground against, and they made a point of making sure they had Kadeem Carey locked down. Aside from those 3 plays where Chad Kelly wasn't in, it was kind of weird. But I don't feel like Toronto abandoned the running game. It's just they didn't have a lot of plays they ran. They only ran Kadeem Carey 9 times, but they only passed 20. So
right, exactly. I thought it was just really smart. Why, so the illusion of balance, right? A perfect game is, 17 passes and 15 runs. No, it makes no sense to throw away downs when you're not going to gain ground running. When Kelly is seeing guys 35 yards down the field, just go with that. If that's working, just rock with that. You don't need to have the running back involved, just because balance makes for a good football team. I thought it was really smart. They couldn't stop Kelly throwing the deep ball, and they just said, well, like, let's just do that. We don't need to make this any more complicated than that.
And for receivers, Makai Polk, 4 targets, 4 catches, 158 yards, and a touchdown. He had a day. He just found a way to get open, even when it wasn't that bust. He was just running great routes. Chad Kelly found him again. Only 20 passing plays, only 2 incomplete balls all day. One that was intended for Kadeem Carey, one that was intended for Ungerer. But yeah, Daniels with 4 catches on 4 targets for 88 and 2 touchdowns. Matal with 4 catches on 4 targets for 49. And then Jake Herzla, who came in for Damonte Coxie, a late scratch. We found out yesterday Coxie wasn't going to be able to go. They scratch him. They dress a 9th defensive lineman, which turned out to be huge. And Jake Herzla, who we saw last week in Edmonton, gets his 2nd touchdown in as many weeks. He played a really smart game on the edge. 4 catches, 4 targets for 47 in that touchdown. The touchdown was great. The sort of shake and bake on his first reception, I thought, was really strong. A guy that was selling out blocking. He was a lead block a couple times for Kadeem Carey. He's a really easy player to like. He gives you everything he has. I practice on Wednesday when I got to watch him. He made a fully extended diving catch. He's just one of those guys that doesn't have an off switch.
He's Rudy. I mean, yes. Who doesn't want to add Rudy?
Yeah.
He clearly, you look at him and he's been captain everywhere he's been. He got invited to NFL camps.
And he's done he doesn't have measurables. He doesn't have measurables and he doesn't even have stats.
No way. There's nothing on earth to suggest, other than like blackmail, to suggest why he would get an invite to an NFL camp. He just is 100, maximum effort. And when given the chance, converts. And you can see the guys reacting around him. And who doesn't love to add a guy, a guy like that, all energy, and give him a chance. He'll score a touchdown. Yeah, I think it's, he's a wonderful addition to the team.
And this is a guy coaches will vouch for. I guarantee that's why he got an NFL shot, is he had his coaches saying, man, you just got to just get this guy in camp. Like, he will, if nothing else, he's going to make everyone around him work that much harder because they see what he's doing. And I think that's been every step of the way, from Old Dominion to Houston to the Seattle Seahawks to the UFL to the Toronto Argonauts now. Like, he's got probably every coach he's ever played for has made a phone call and said, hey, just give this guy a chance. Bring him in. You won't be disappointed.
Exactly.
Maybe the way to close this up, let's talk about the way the game ended, the 2 pick sixes. I want to talk about Wynton McManus's first. That was an elite play from Wynton McManus. And to break that down, if you didn't see it all developing, the Argos lined up like they were going to rush 3. At the last second, Wynton came charging down out of deep linebacker set into the A gap, and it looked like he was going to blitz. And I think Drew Brown's doing mental math. He's like, okay, McManus is coming A gap. That means I've got this, middle of the field's open. On the snap, McManus now bails out hard, is reading Drew Brown's eyes, and Brown goes to the middle of the field looking for a route coming across the formation, and McManus picks it off, starts running it back, goes to his left, sees DaVaris McFadden with no one around him, and then dishes it off to McFadden, who runs around some 78 yards or whatever it was, all the way for a touchdown. First of all, great heads-up play by Wynton to fool Brown. Great athletic play to pick off that football, and great awareness to see that, hey, we can take this thing back if I give it to tea time, and he gets it to him. But as an offensive coach, why are we lateraling the football in that stage of the game with the lead in the fourth quarter? It ended up being the right thing. I had a heart attack when I saw him go and pitch that football, because there's no way I'm letting my receivers do that. And yet you seem to have a different creative license with a defensive captain to make a play like that.
I would say there's one player on that team who has permission to lateral the ball backwards. And he was the one who used it. Because even when they showed head coach watching, he didn't say anything. I was watching to see. I think they were waiting to see too if he was going to start yelling no. And like, oh, you just say, okay, sure. Listen, in Wynton you trust.
Yeah, that was.
Man, he has permission. He has the okay. to lateral that backwards. Nobody else on the team does.
And how about McFadden showing some speed? He gets knocked sometimes for not being a 4-3 guy and a 4-2 guy like the other DBs on the field.
Awesome.
And he reversed field and took off. No one came near him.
Yeah,
and then,
no, I love it. It was a little bit of swag for the defense because look, they got taken to the shed today. I mean, that's a lot of points. And I thought the pick and knock on wood, Amos was fine. The 2 picks, I think gave them a little juice, which is nice. Heading into the film to be like, okay, we can tighten this up a little bit. Against Montreal. I haven't heard anything about him. He did walk off the field, but it didn't look great.
Yeah, I kept an eye on him on the sideline. So it was a knee to knee. So to me, it didn't look like we're talking ligaments again. Like I shouldn't even really be speculating right now because I'm just watching this from up here. But I did see a replay. It looked like knee to knee, like really hard knee to knee, and that can be a ton of things that are going to keep him out. But it was positive to see him walk off on his own steam very slowly. But once he got to the sideline, he did start picking up a little bit, and he was still walking, but he was walking faster. He wasn't in the tent. He wasn't getting looked at by trainers. He was trying to walk it off is what it looked like to me.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
So I think that's a really good sign. It doesn't mean he's out of the woods yet. Certainly because the thought on Damonte Coxie was, he looked way better after the game last week than he did when he was barely making it off the field. We thought, well, maybe there's a good chance of him being able to play this week. And of course he didn't. So we'll have to wait and see on Deshaun Amos. That's probably going to be one that carries on throughout the week and maybe a game time decision next week. We'll have to wait and see what the extent of that injury is. But it's such a shame. It was with a minute left in the game and the best defender on the Argos team this season, like from start to finish of the season. If it's not Wyndham McManus because he was out for 6 games, then it's Deshaun Amos, who was elite in coverage, so much so that he only had 25 tackles, 7 takeaways, and that's because quarterbacks didn't want to go anywhere near him. They kept the ball away from him, the way we've seen with Dietrich Nichols in Winnipeg over the last few seasons, where quarterbacks are like, I'm not throwing it to that side of the field because Deshaun Amos is there in coverage. So that would be a huge loss for Toronto. Hopefully, he's going to be okay, and hopefully that was just one of those extremely painful knee-on-knee hits that didn't cause any further damage. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that. And then Benji Franklin, with his pick 6, jumps that route at the end. He knows he's got help over top because they're playing in prevent, but just great break on the ball. I love to see that because he got burned so many times in great coverage. He kept allowing catches despite being right there, despite getting a handle on the football. I love to see him get rewarded at the end of the game and to flash some of that 4.3 speed as he took off to, 4.28 speed as he took off towards the end zone for a second pick 6.
I mean, the fact that he was able to play man on Pemberton again shows you like that would be almost impossible to do.
Yeah, and that's the reason for the trend. That's why they did that.
And he's right there. I mean, he's right there. They just full credit to the receiver for holding on to those contested footballs and for the quarterback. But I mean, he was absolutely right on top of him on those quick slants.
Let's wrap things up with our players of the game and our plays of the game. I'll let you go first. Who is your player of the game today? Lots to choose from.
Yeah, so many to choose from. McManus was superb all game. It's like out of a Western or something. He's just like this one cowboy in the middle of the field controlling the whole field. It just feels like everything happens as part of his plan. I could have got McManus. It wasn't much of a defensive game totally in terms of score. I want to go Daniels. I thought it was, we talked about how he's the guy that we hoped would jump into the space Coxie left, and he did. And that's exactly what you hope from your veterans. If Daniels is going to be Daniels, Toronto will be nigh impossible to stop.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I was thinking,
if he is who he can be, I don't see how you stop Toronto offensively.
4 catches
with Coxie and Polk. I mean, I just think I think it was amazing to see him kind of remind us all how good he can be.
4 catches on 4 targets, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'm going to go to Chad Kelly as the player of the game. I just don't think you can play much better than he did. 18 of 20 for 358 yards, 4 touchdowns, 5 total touchdowns, 29 yards rushing in there as well. That's as good a game as you can play, and people were looking to see how's he going to respond. His last playoff game went terribly for him. It was maybe the worst game of his career. How was he going to respond back out on the same field? Was it going to be Buckner walking back into Shea? It wasn't. He played, I think, the best game I've ever seen him play. And what a way to respond to the critics that were wondering if we might see a repeat performance from last year's East Final. So he gets my player of the game nod. But like you said, we could have gone so many different directions. And your play of the game, what turned this for?
Well, I mean, I think initially I was leaning towards that kick by Ottawa. But you know what? I think I picked play by the other team last time too. So I'm gonna get away from that. I thought my play of the game came in the second quarter, and it was after, my one thing was no turnovers. It was after the quarterback fumble, the sack fumble. And if Ottawa scores a touchdown there is a danger of the crowd getting a little nervous about things unraveling a little bit. And I thought that Toronto holding them to a field goal, was huge. So, like, for plays, I mean, you can choose, D'Angelo tackling the rush, or you can have the knockdown penalty on the throw. I guess it's sort of a combination of 3 plays, but I thought they're holding that to a field goal was a defining moment of the game.
I am going to go off the board a little bit with a hipster pick, which is usually your wheelhouse. I think maybe the play of the game might have been the 10-yard run that Kadeem Carey had when Chad Kelly came out of the football game, where you're suddenly thinking, oh my goodness, is this going to now turn on its head? Toronto down by 3 points at that stage, driving, and Chad Kelly comes out, Arbuckle comes in, everyone knows it's going to be a run, and I think it was an 11-yard carry, actually, his longest of the day. And that showed, hey, even when they know we're running, we're going to be able to do it. We're going to look out for our guys here. We're going to look out for our coach. We're going to look out for each other. We're going to run block the heck out of this. And Carey just toughed out those yards, got that first down, went and did it again, did it twice. And then Chad Kelly comes in and, of course, throws that touchdown pass to DaVaris Daniels. That Kadeem Carey run was sensational. And to me, was the play of the game. In a game that had so many plays of the game when you have 96 total points. But that one for me really stood out. So East Final at Montreal next Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And it is going to be an opportunity for Toronto to exact some revenge. Montreal took Toronto down. They won the East last year, had an unbelievably talented team with a CFL historic best 16-2 record. And Montreal came and whipped them at BMO Field. Toronto now has a chance to go into Montreal and give them a little payback and make their way to the Grey Cup in BC. So next up, Montreal, 3 p.m. next Saturday.
I will say my dad, as a lifelong Owls fan, he's a little nervous. He's a little nervous about Les Argots coming on the Via.
That will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. From BMO Field, Argos 58, Redblacks 38. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.
Together, fight the